Greetings, I'm Kristian from Cinema Nova and welcome to the Intermission Interviews. Each episode we invite guests from across the filmmaking and cinema industries to reflect on the past, tell us about their present, and to cast their mind to the future during what has come to be known across the show business community as the Intermission. My guest today appears weekly on the ABC News Breakfast as the program's in-house film critic. He's the general manager of Melbourne's famed repertory venue, the Astor Theatre, and is a good friend of mine. Welcome to the Intermission Interviews, ZAC Hepburn. So, ZAC, tell me about 3 recent highlights, special events, personal experiences or content you saw that stood out in the past 12 months or so prior to the intermission.
Look, that's a big question because I think there was a lot of interesting things happening, not just within the cinema industry, but also just within the performing arts sector. And now that it's all sort of grounded to a halt, you kind of, you have to kind of think about what you did and what you saw. For me, the release of Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was really important. What I loved about that film was that it was transmitting these sort of frequencies, and I think if you were hip to those frequencies and you could tune into them, you really got something out of that movie. And it was really heartwarming to see so many different exhibitors engaging with that film in so many different ways, whether that be through celluloid presentation or theming bars and foyers. That to me is a real personification of what we should be doing when we have a film like that to present a unique experience for an audience member. And even for an exhibitor like myself, it was so encouraging to see the different ways the industry sort of rallied around that film and presented it to the public, as it's a film that rewards repeat viewing. So it was nice to be able to see different locations presenting the film to the audience that they could, go back habitually and see it presented in a different way, know it was the same film. So that really stood out for me as a key thing over the last 12 months. Recently too, it was probably one of the last things I went to before the intermission occurred, was the Hear My Eyes event, which was a rescore of Dario Argento's classic film Suspiria with a sort of super group. And, for those that don't know, Hear My Eyes is essentially an outfit that takes iconic films and rescores them with contemporary musicians. And something like Suspiria has got such an iconic score and it's loved by so many throughout the different generations that have engaged with the work. So it was, I think, a huge ask for a band to rescore a film like Suspiria. Obviously, Goblin's score for the original film is so iconic. King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard were involved with that rescore, and it was really interesting, and it reminded you of just how powerful music is in films. And I know that's a bit of a cliche to say, but when you've seen a film like Suspiria as many times as I have, and I have seen it quite a few times, seeing it reskinned and retooled just by altering the audio was a really interesting experience, and something I was quite a fan of. I was, quite kind of trepidatious going in. I wasn't too sure what to expect, but I was very pleasantly surprised. And really, the last one for me was something I was personally involved with. So it's a highlight professionally, personally, and just all around is the annual Talking Heads Stop Making Sense dance party that I hosted at the Astor. But whilst I'm there in a work capacity, I'm really just there as an audience member too, because the way that film brings everyone together and gets them off their seat dancing around, it was something I think we all needed at the start of January, and I feel really blessed to have been able to experience that this year, because it's a really fond memory and something I look back on with a lot of passion, because it's something I think that we're not too sure when we're going to be able to do that again. I know we will be able to do that again, but it's a fantastic thing to be able to have been involved with. And it just shows that the healing power of David Byrne and Talking Heads. So I firmly believe that music has a healing power. And so if you want to throw on some Talking Heads, nothing wrong with that.
Well, it's funny you say that. I mean, last night we were outside and would have been a little bit sort of around dusk, and somebody was playing "I Will Survive" somewhere here in Fitzroy at the loudest possible speakers. They must have had massive speakers, and at the end of the song, you could hear the entire suburb applaud. And you're right. I think that music is a really important thing, and in fact, I mean, it's actually a through line through all 3 of the things you just mentioned there. I mean, obviously with Tarantino, he pays so much attention to the music that he uses in films, and then obviously with the repurposing of older films. I mean, I saw something very similar to what you're talking about with Hear My Eyes. many, many years ago at the Arts Centre, where they played the original 1920s version of Ben-Hur, which was rescored by the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. And they played the old black and white version of Fred Niblow's Ben-Hur up on the big screen with this live score accompaniment. And it really did. It made for one of the most formative experiences for me as a young moviegoer. And I suppose the thing is that, again, all three of the things that you mentioned there are all about eventizing cinema. And I suppose what we've both discovered through our respective roles is that we do really need to go and put that extra layer on top of a film in order to really engage with an audience, whether it is, like you say, simply by projecting it in a 35mm format, or doing something special with the bar, or indeed doing a live dance party as you did with the Talking Heads event, which was just extraordinary. But the interesting thing also, I think, is that, I mean, these things are amazing when they come off, but at the same time, though, I mean, it's not always a sure thing. So how do you find kind of the balance between creating an event that you think that people will attend, and then at the same time going and, knowing whether or not something's going to be successful without even trying it before?
That's a really good question, and I don't think you can know. I think you just have to kind of have your ear to the ground and trust your gut instinct on things. And I think there's levels of eventization that you can go with, whether it's just a simple introduction, which is a little bit less risky, or doing a full-blown dance party. I mean, there's so many different levels of engaging with a film on that extra level for an audience member. But, and I suppose another example was when we did the late night screening of Cats, and, I spoke to so many different people about that, and everyone told me that I was mad for doing it. And, again, that was a film I did not care for, all cards on the table when I saw it. But seeing it with an audience that was so engaged with it and so much in the zone of a late night kind of rowdy screening, that film has now completely changed, in my opinion, and I feel that's the only way you can see it. So, yeah, I think, to answer your question, it's really, you just have to trust your instincts, and I think you have to look at what the zeitgeist is, what the fandom is around a film potentially, and what that film has for an audience and what it doesn't have. Like, you're obviously not going to do an event around a 8-hour Bellatar film, but you could do it around a Talking Heads film or a film about anthropomorphized cats. That works. So I guess you just kind of got to go with what you know and just kind of trust your instincts, and you learn from your mistakes. Sometimes things work, sometimes things don't work.
Yeah, you're right. Well, is there anything you've been watching during the intermission that's really stood out for you? Something you can recommend, or something you can recommend us to stay away from?
Well, we have been watching quite a lot of content at home. I've got three for you. I've got a must watch. That would be The Outsider, the Stephen King adaptation by Richard Price, the fantastic writer who did The Night Of, and who also, incidentally, he also wrote the screenplay for Sea of Love, that great old
the Al Pacino film.
Yeah, but this is a Stephen King adaptation, and it does what every Stephen King adaptation should do, in my opinion, is it doesn't go by the book. It changes it up, and what it does is it goes from a police procedural about a child murder and a suspected man, and it morphs into this supernatural horror. And that's all I'm going to say about it, but it's a really captivating, it was originally going to be a limited series, and now it looks like it's going to be an actual series with multiple seasons. But Ben Mendelsohn is in the central role of it, and this is A+ Mendo. Like, he is doing fantastic work in this series. So that gets the thumbs up from me. It's really captivating. On the must-avoid list, and I feel bad for saying this, but I must, the relaunch of Amazing Stories is the amazing story that goes nowhere. Like, I really did not like the relaunch of Amazing Stories. And I was a huge fan of the original anthology series. I used to get the compilation videotapes and kind of chew through them. And, obviously Steven Spielberg creating that kind of anthology series was something akin to the, Twilight Zone or The Outer Limits. But, if you're looking for a cure for insomnia in these sort of distancing times, chuck on the first episode of Amazing Stories 2020, and that's what you will find. I was severely...
I will confess that I was watching an episode of Amazing Stories, and I didn't make it all the way to the end. I fell asleep.
It's I'm not sure if there's something like there's some kind of subliminal transmission going on there to calm you down or something. But yeah, it's like you're stuck in a waiting room and you can't leave. So probably avoid that one. And look, with my wife and I have been alternating television shows or serialized narratives with feature films. So we do one night, one the other night. We rewatched Amadeus, which I've always been a huge fan of, and I got to tell you, that movie holds up so well. Like the performances from F. Murray Abraham and Tom Hulce, the production design, the cinematography. It's just one of those classic early 80s large-scale productions, which I just, whilst we are still making multi-million-dollar blockbusters, that film has just got such an air of like refinement and panache to it, which, always gets me. So I'm a huge fan of that one. And I also rewatched Young Sherlock Holmes, the Barry Levinson film, which I hadn't seen in years. And I might have just been my nostalgic little 10-year-old boy jumping up and down inside me saying that's a fantastic film. I love that movie, but God, I really enjoyed it. And I was doing a little bit of research actually on it because it's not a film you hear of very often. It actually has the first full CGI character creation.
Yeah, with the stained glass window.
The stained glass soldier and Night that Comes jumps out. Yeah, so look, as I said, there could just be my nostalgic wave, making me a bit biased, but I really did enjoy those two films. And both films in the 1980s.
If nostalgia was a major part of it, I reckon you would be a lot more forgiving, perhaps, of amazing stories.
Sure.
But it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I've been just watching there's a Tom Hanks produced series on Foxtel called The Movies, which basically just takes a decade and spends 2 episodes running about 40 minutes for each episode. So you get about 80 minutes per decade. And it's actually, look, I've learned nothing new from it because I know everything that all the talking heads say or feel like I do. But at the same time, though, it's been a great reminder of some of the most amazing films. And in fact, I think both Young Sherlock Holmes and Amadeus actually showed up. And in the case of Amadeus, which is a movie that I don't think I've seen since the days of VHS, it really does look quite spectacular. Because I remember you mentioning that you'd watched it, and so I was like, oh, I've got to get back and re-see it. And I suppose that's the thing. I mean, it is the opportunity. I mean, when I was looking through SBS the other day online and seeing all the stuff that's available on demand there, I mean, the quality of some of the things that you can actually find for free through the free-to-air services, the films particularly, is just extraordinary.
And you can kind of go on your own kind of curatorial mission as well too, because like you say, you see a photo of something or you see a write-up of something and you watch something, you can kind of move in your own kind of wave there. And it's interesting, that you have all these streaming services or these other platforms that give you, suggestions, but they're usually so off the mark. So if you can, exercise a little bit of kind of self-curatorial philosophy and, look at a film and then jump from point A to point B, that's, I think, a really interesting way of doing filmic discoveries. And in a way, it's sort of, I think, what we used to do when we used to kind of like, kind of wander the VHS aisles in the video store doing, your 5 weekly movies for $5 or whatever it was. You look at the cover and you kind of jump around the section. And so I think, whilst it is nostalgia and, we know that nostalgia is, something that we all do trade in from time to time. There's a real kind of comfort to it as well. And we're not talking like kind of Stranger Things level nostalgia, but, being able to re-engage with things and reconnect with films that you used to love or used to view, and then finding something out completely new. Like I'm doing a bit of research at the moment on some 80s films, and I found this movie called Heartbeeps, starring Andy Kaufman and Bernadette Peters, with makeup effects by Stan Winston. And I never even heard of this movie, and now I have to find it.
Well, good luck.
I don't know. I mean, life's tricky enough at the moment. I don't know if I need to add the search for Heartbeeps onto my plate, but I'm up for the challenge.
No, I think it sounds like a very worthy goal. I think it's something that you should really do, and we should do. You should screen it at the Astor when you finally rediscover who owns it.
Hey, look, really, what else is a repertory cinema for from 1936, if not to bring the world back to the title of Heartbeat, right? By Andy Kaufman.
Well, thinking ahead, I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, what we're still in the midst of everything going on now. I mean, just this morning we heard some news about some changes on the Disney slate. For instance, there was what was probably best described as a youth skewed version of Men in Black, or sort of Harry Potter meets Men in Black, called Artemis Fowl, which the studio's had on its slate now for over a year. And they've just announced that that's going straight to home entertainment through Disney Plus. But in the same announcement, the studio said that the new Wes Anderson film, which is The French Dispatch, which was currently dated for August locally, is now getting pushed back to October. So thinking ahead and thinking about like what the shape of the industry is going to be in light of the COVID-19 crisis, I mean, what's your kind of expectation? What do you feel is... how do you feel this is going to shape the landscape in a way that we will see the repercussions of for the immediate and long-term future?
Yeah, that's the $10 million question, really, isn't it? Because I feel like information is changing every day, so your kind of outlook on things changes every day of what it's going to be like when we go back to normal, or whatever quote unquote normal is. I feel we kind of touched on it, I think, briefly when we started our conversation. I think there's going to be a renewed interest for eventization and signature. And I think, whilst there'll be a habitual nature for audiences to go back to the cinema, because I think we'll all be craving that kind of normalcy. So we definitely should just continue to do what we were doing, because that's a comfort blanket for people when the cinemas reopen, everyone can just go to a movie and enjoy themselves. But I think there's an opportunity for exhibitors and distributors and even filmmakers to use a bit of ingenuity and to pepper that normalcy with a bit of creativity, and whether that be themed foyers for films, or different presentations, or different pre-shows, or introductions, just some sort of additional connection, because I think we're all going to be so starved for that connection, and having that sort of curatorial signature to be able to connect with audiences. Because when audiences do go back to the cinema, they're going to be quite used to that idea that the content is there, and it's just how do I navigate it myself. So having that kind of shepherd to be able to talk to cinema audience and say, no, this is something that's going to be at the cinema, and this has got that kind of prestigious nature around it. I think that's going to be really important, and I think that's what audiences will be craving. I think it's up to us to be able to reconnect with audiences in that fashion, to remind them what the cinema experience is, and how vital it is to just an enjoyment factor and a night out at the movies, and how precious that is.
Yeah, you're right. It's an interesting idea, isn't it? Because we're ultimately faced with a scenario where the audience is being given the chance to really involve themselves in streaming, and I think that everybody's certainly getting onto, whether it's freely available stuff like SBS or the other commercial networks, or there's things like Netflix, etc. But look, it's early days, and we don't really know. But it does feel like people. I have a theory that people might actually feel that after they've sat around with Netflix for 2 or 3 months, that maybe it might actually be much clearer line for the audience in terms of being able to differentiate between the quality of something they might find in cinema, or perhaps the diversity of what they might find in cinemas, versus what they find on Netflix. I think Netflix and the other streamers are very attractive, and they've got an enormous amount of content. But at the same time, though, maybe now is a good opportunity for audiences to truly understand the precise differences between what makes something theatrical and what makes something suitable for streaming.
Yeah, I think there's a beautiful legitimacy to sitting in a room with a communal audience, the lights going down, and you're seeing something that's been produced for a cinema screen at the cinema. And whilst platforms offer so many different options and so much variety, and that's very legitimate itself, but yeah, there's a real kind of just traditional beauty to going into a collective space and experiencing a story with your fellow audience members. And I think we just need to make sure that we're really nailing that sort of presentation and really nailing that cinema experience to remind the returning audiences just how vital that is.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thanks very much for joining us today, Zach. Hope you enjoy the rest of the intermission, and hopefully we'll see you on the other side.
I'll be watching Heartbeeps. You'll find me.